Welcome to our podcast, Our Story to Tell, where we share the behind the scenes of moving our family abroad and how that move changed everything for us.
We're Rissa and Tanner, an American family living life abroad with our two little adventures. From the US to Germany, Japan, and now Italy, we're sharing the real, the messy, and beautiful parts of living abroad.
We're not just storytelling travelers. This podcast is about transformation and leaving behind certainty for curiosity instead.
We found that some of the most meaningful conversations happen in the in-between, in the messy middle of figuring things out. And that's what this podcast is going to be doing. It's not a place to find advice. It's not a guidebook. It's a story, and it's our story. And we hope that some of it will sound a little bit like yours too. So let's get started.
Welcome back, everyone. Episode 4. This has been really fun for us, and it's been really fun to see the engagement between like our traditional YouTube community, and then I think we're starting to find a lot of other people who are resonating with some of our first episodes. To recap, the first few episodes has really been a life story of us. Very fast, very quick, but has provided some good insights, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. And it's been really interesting receiving feedback from you guys. First off, we just want to say, thank you so much for all of your support. Emotionally, it means a lot to us because these past couple episodes, we've been sharing some deeply personal things. And honestly, it's taken a lot of bravery on our part to do so. We know that our story is not necessarily unique. However, it is personal.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Talking about our spiritual upbringing and seeing so many people share commonalities, even outside of the same structure we had, has been like healing and connecting more than anything. Episode 3, for those of you who may have not tuned into that one, was recapping our first few months after I finished coming back from my mission. We got married, finished through college, and really had a lot of great work experience. And that led us all the way up to our final summer up in Washington. And that's where we're going to pick up from today, is when we are taking off on one of the greatest adventures that we had up in that point in life. And that was when we took the next 6 months to travel across Asia, the Pacifica, and Australia. And what an experience that was. We're really excited about this episode to dive deep into kind of the cultural impacts, the memories, the things that we learned, and how that really set our perspective of what we wanted from life off to this completely different path that neither of us really could have imagined growing up.
Yeah, I will say this idea was brewing in my mind for quite some time. I went to Thailand when I was a freshman in college, and after that, I just got the travel bug. It took some time to convince Tanner of this big backpacking trip, but essentially we had agreed upon
2 months, I think we'd agreed, let's do 60 days and we'll see where it goes. I was a little skeptical of taking off and being gone for months on end, because it was traditionally the thing you graduated and you got a job. And usually right after college is the best time to find a job because you have little gap in work experience. So I was a little skeptical, but we decided on 2 months.
Definitely important to acknowledge that there is a lot of privilege to be able to even take a gap year off. So this actually is a perfect segue to one of the questions that we received by one of you guys on Instagram. Prior to filming these podcast episodes, we opened up a Q&A box on Instagram and just let you guys ask questions that you'd be interested in having us answer. So one of them asked, want to travel, but where to start and how to do so affordably? To answer that question, for us, it came with a lot of savings. So because there was over a year in the making, we had some time to save up for it. That would be a big one, is, you have to just kind of work to save for it. And then we'll get more into this as we dive into each country, but travel can look very, very different. It depends on what your idea of travel is. For us, we were going full backpack style, very, very economically.
I would say backpack style, but using public transportation. We weren't hiking and hitchhiking, but we were doing the backpack style of, we're going to fit everything into carry-on bags, and we're going to do our very best to save on eating, on accommodations, on activities in general, while still trying to enjoy all those really fun activities. And we'll get into those for sure.
We're starting out this trip in Southeast Asia. Our very first country we're going to is India. And a lot of these Asian countries that we visited are quite affordable to travel to. So that's going to make a really big difference is your destination. Europe, America, Australia, these countries are going to be far more expensive to travel to than some countries in Asia, Africa, South America. If you want to still travel but do so affordably, you'd probably want to go to a cheaper country.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Of course, nowadays there are random flash sales for flights. So that's also something to consider if you have like a flight tracker for a particular destination that you're looking for. Maybe that's something you could like find a really great deal and that would be enough of it for your budget. The other way that we really tried to save was on like the accommodations and the style of accommodation. There are so many amazing luxury private rentals you can get in the Maldives or in like Africa or really anywhere. You can get some amazing places, but they come with the price, and that's like how much you can do outside of your accommodation.
We should say that we assume that they're amazing because we've never stayed in one.
I will say there was one that we stayed in Slovenia that I would consider more of a luxury, right on like the lake side, kind of like a little chalet, and you had an amazing view of the Alps behind you. But that was fortunately, like I reached out and did a collaboration when I did some trail running there. Atypical for our experience, honestly. The types of places that we would stay in were like $10 to $20 a night, and 20 was like on the high end for us. And of course, that was because it was just us two. So that's another thing to consider. Like if you're traveling with a family, like that's going to look different. And the creative or flexible thinking when it comes to accommodations is important.
Yeah, this was pre-kids, so we definitely have to set the stage on that. And we were willing to rough it. And honestly, we did. Some websites that I like to mention to individuals looking for budget travel is volunteer travel opportunities. This is going to be a really awesome way for you to have an amazing cultural experience and save a lot of money on accommodations. So one of the websites that we used when we did this backpacking trip was called Woofing. This is basically like a volunteer type program in exchange for accommodation. So we'll share the experience that we did, but some other examples that come to mind are you could work at like an organic farm in the Swiss Alps, literally in the Swiss Alps, and stay for free. Every experience or opportunity you see on their website is oftentimes going to differ. They have set amount of hours that you have to dedicate towards that volunteer experience, say working in the garden or on the farm. And then in exchange, you get oftentimes free board, sometimes free food, and sometimes they'll like have transportation options on the side or even like travel opportunities. I've seen a lot of them as like hostel opportunities, house sitting, pet sitting. Yeah, there's a lot out there.
And then another creative option is to look into couch surfing. Now, with families, this gets increasingly difficult. This is more for solo travelers or like couple travelers where you go on the platform of couch surfing. There are somewhat vetted. I can't say exactly how deep the vetting process is for them. Individuals who open up their home or literally their couch in some instances for people like you and I to go. And that's what we did in Christchurch in New Zealand.
So like we kind of started off this answer, it really depends on what travel means to you. If you're looking for adventure travel, that could be a good fit for you. If you're more of you want to relax, enjoy, not really be bothered, those are probably not the best fit for you.
And one final thing that I would add onto that is be flexible with the location and the time of the year. Those are going to be some of the largest factors. Living in Europe and in Asia, we noticed so many people try to take advantage of the summers, and rightfully so. But shoulder seasons, although they're getting still busy, they are the best times in a lot of ways because the crowds are lower and hotels and flights are often cheaper. So I would say if you have like this destination, you want to go to Paris, you want to go to Tokyo, try and look on shoulder seasons. In the end, I think that that's worth doing.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Okay, that was kind of a long answer to that, but we honestly could have went far more in depth. But going back to where we were, we're getting ready to go on this trip. We moved home from Washington, and our parents were very, very kind to let us like fill our old bedrooms with our stuff.
Thank you, storage unit parents.
Yes. We left with our backpacks to explore a part of the world we had never been before.
So the primary purpose and like one of the driving purposes of starting this trip was because of the nonprofit that we had started. It was to go and have nutrition education. And we found an organization in northern India, in Himachal Pradesh, who had an organization founded there around the community. After talking and making some coordinations, we set up a 2-week volunteer experience to go up there and teach nutrition education. So here we are, 23 and 22.
Years old.
Yeah. Here we are, 23 and 22 years old. And we're taking off with a group of 18 volunteers to go to northern India, a country we've never been to. And we love Indian food, but obviously it was so much deeper than just the idea. It was about the opportunity to go and learn more and hopefully find ways to improve nutrition education in the area.
Yeah, so let me provide a little bit more details about our nonprofit organization here real quick, because we're actually going to be hosting another trip to India in 2026. I'm very, very excited about it. So I'm putting this plug in here for anyone that's listening. If you're interested in joining us, applications are going to be available January 1st to January 31st of 2026, just a couple months away. And we're going to be doing the same trip, a very, very similar trip as we did back in 2018. You're going to have an option to either do just the nutrition education part, which is in Dharamshala, India, like Tanner said, in Himachal Pradesh, which is in northern India, nestled up against the Himalayan mountains, a beautiful, beautiful community there. We teach nutrition education, and the mission of our nonprofit, it's called NEEM, Nutrition Education Ending Malnutrition, is to combat malnutrition.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this. And honestly, I'm a little bit sad. I likely will not be going. I'll be here with the girls, but I'm really excited for Rissa and the rest of the team who'll be going out there. We're going to be having our website, neeminc.org, listed down in the description. You can go and check out more information there. And eventually that's where the applications will be found.
Please apply, you guys. It would be so fun to get to know you guys and just to have you join us in a cause that is so important to me, near and dear to my heart. So anyways, let's jump into it. We got on a flight and landed in India.
That was such an experience. The second we got outside of the air-conditioned area of the Delhi airport, it was like a wave of humidity that I had never experienced before. And very quickly we were immersed with like the chaos of New Delhi. That's kind of like one of the key takeaways that we will always remember is the sensory of the sounds, the heat, the smells, the crowds. It's another world in India, especially in populated Delhi.
Yeah, I have to chuckle a little bit that we've never been to India, and yet here we are leading 18 individuals in such a vibrant and high sensory country. I remember trying to catch an Uber and it just like kept on falling through. They try and call my phone. And I mean, it was just like a whirlwind of figuring out how to like get a ride to our hotel. It took us more time than it should have. But once we finally found a driver, I remember he actually couldn't even drop us off at our accommodations because of construction. Picture us with like our backpacks on. We hop out of this car. He's like trying to point, to where it is. And we're just like, thank you, see ya. So there's Tanner and I just walking in the street. It's like gravel roads. And the main thing that sticks out to me is seeing all of the electrical wires like hanging down in the streets all over. Like you can see them. They're so visual. And that is when it hit me like, oh, wow, we are in another world.
It was fairly close to the airport, but it wasn't like a nice hotel area like the NEEM hotels. We literally found a place, I think, for $10. We got there the day before all of the volunteers to try and, assimilate to the time change and to get a little bit of more sleep. We got all sorts of looks because we're not in a tourist area. But we check into the hotel room and you had your first like bucket shower bath that time.
Squatty
potties. And we crashed for a few hours, woke up from the nap. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, I'm in India right now. And just like you have to re-experience all of those new things. And I vividly remember us walking to go get some thali, assortment of Indian curries dishes for like our first meal. And I remember walking and we saw like a super busy road under like the overpass, and like this cow is just minding his own business walking down the street. And it was like a vivid memory for me too that we were just in a new place.
Also not to be forgotten is like the string of neon lights at the bottom of the hallway, which was like the only lighting in
the
on
hotel
our floor. Yeah. So it always just feels like a little eerie until you get in and can like turn on a brighter light. Honestly, this is setting the stage for what a lot of our accommodations look like. Very, very budget. But hey, this one we had at least reserved in advance.
So after that first full night in New Delhi, we made our way to the airport to round up all of the other volunteers. And then we spent the next 3 days having an amazing time between visiting the Taj Mahal, visiting the local markets, local temples, and just kind of getting everyone onto the same time zone and getting ready to go up north.
So up north, our focus was entirely on volunteer work. We do include some excursions to go on like on the weekend when we're not volunteering and after hours, but our time spent up north is really aligned with our mission and our goal. And just being able to meet the locals, to have such close interactions with these amazing women and children. That's what our nonprofit focuses on, is we believe that women are the most powerful voice for change. Oftentimes they're the ones buying foods, cooking the meals, and, providing meals for the family. Just being able to meet them forever shaped us. Those are our most memorable and important kind of trips that we take, is when we have those interactions with the locals. So it was an amazing time. We could spend forever talking about it, but we will just say that we grew a lot during that time and we loved it. And then we said goodbye to the volunteers, and it was me and you.
And that was like when everything really, really started for us. The start of like one of the best stretches of our entire marriage. Up until that point, and obviously having kids will trump so many memories as well. But yeah, we hopped on a train and didn't have an accommodation that night. So we got off of the train, walked across the tracks, and basically went from hotel to hotel that was kind of close by and found another place for the night.
I think that one, if memory serves me right, was like $8. And then the next morning we got back on a train to go to Jaipur. And this is a city known as, I think, like the Pink City, right? One of the highlights from that area was going on an overnight desert camel safari.
We rode out for like an hour or two on the camels, slept on cots, and we had some delicious pakora and other Indian dishes like dal and rice. And honestly, it was a really fun experience to be out there, beautiful sand dunes, sleeping under the stars with a couple of other international tourists and some local guides.
Yeah, and also on that trip, we got to see some of like these abandoned villages and learn more about the history there. So really, really cool. But I would say our next destination was a lot. I don't know really how to word it. So we ended up from there going to Varanasi.
Varanasi is a very spiritual city sitting along the river Ganges, and a lot of people will bring their family members who are deceased, and they will cremate them on the banks of the river and then pour their ashes into the river. And it's a very spiritual experience for them. We went and visited the crematorium, and you could see limbs hanging out of the burning wood piles. Like the bodies are wrapped before they're placed in the crematory, but as you're walking through, things are falling. And, sorry to be graphic, but it was just the reality of the experience. And it's very touching, because everyone dies and everyone has an end of their life. So going through there, I'm just thinking eyes are watering. It was super hard to breathe. Mm-hmm. We got a little tour from a local explaining a little bit more of the history. And it was just a very touching experience for us.
I think on a religious, spiritual standpoint, for us, we were born into the Mormon theology and religion. And so for us to be able to see such devotion in Hinduism was also very cool. I think that's where I started to, have my eyes opened a little bit more. My shelf breaking, I guess, is being able to have these experiences to see that there are far more people practicing Hinduism. They estimate 100,000 individuals' ashes are thrown into the river per year. That was back in 2018 when he told us that. We're referencing this from our journals that we recorded. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this little book I'm holding up. And that's what they said, is that, about 100,000 cremated bodies are thrown into the river each year. So much so that they actually had snapping turtles.
Yeah, they have flesh-eating snapping turtles in the area because of some of the remains that are thrown in there,
Anyways, not to get off subject, but I think that's just where some of my religious beliefs and perspective really started to expand, to realize that there are so many people in the world, far greater than those that are of Mormon religion, doing this that is so different than anything we grew up with. And I think I just realized that there's a lot of rituals and truths and traditions that are all over the world. I mean, I know that sounds so simple when I say it, but like to experience it that way, it just hits you in a different place.
I will 100% agree with you on that one. I fully felt that once you were living the experience and in a place completely surrounded by like Hinduism and like the gods and the beliefs there, that's completely different than reading it in like a religious class or a story or watching a video. They can be impactful and open your eyes, but until you're there, literally breathing ash and hearing songs. And we took a boat ride on the river that night. They were doing flower candle lighting ceremonies where they would put the flowers on the river and they were chanting, they were singing songs, they were saying prayers. It's just like a completely different environment overall. And I think, like you said very well, it opens up your perspective to see how many millions and billions of other people who not only practice Mormonism, but who don't practice Christianity. And ultimately, it really drove home the point that like you are a product of your environment, and where you are born like affects your religious beliefs, your socioeconomic status, so many things in your life. And these individuals in this region of the world was just the same as it was for us for Christianity, but for Hinduism.
I remember chalking a lot of these experiences up to be like magical moments. And I would still 100% agree with that. Do you remember as we traveled, I'd be like, this is a magical moment. And it was, and I felt that way. And in that same breath, I could appreciate it, love to be experiencing it. And I would say it didn't really shake a lot of my faith, because growing up as a Mormon, we were taught often to be like in the world, but not of the world. And so I felt like it's kind of these experiences that it like gives you a new perspective, but you're like, we still feel like our religion is the right one.
100%.
And I think that's also okay. I'm sure every person in their religion feels like theirs is kind of the right one. And so I guess I'm just saying that to say it opened up our eyes and started that journey of just experiencing and seeing the world as a much bigger and beautiful place than I had ever experienced or perceived it to be. And it was just early on in that journey.
Once we finished up with Varanasi, we actually had a few change of plans because southern India was going under intense storms and lots of flooding. So we actually booked our flights a few days earlier to go to Sri Lanka. But before we jump into Sri Lanka, at the end of each of the countries that we visited, we wanted to recap and share a few pieces of information.
So if I was to give some travel tips for individuals traveling to India, we've kind of already said it, but I would say be aware that it's going to be a lot for your senses. You're going to hear a lot of noises. You're going to smell a lot of uncomfortable smells. Even the food, a lot of people talk about Delhi belly. It's going to be different, but I think it's going to help you grow a lot. Especially if you're a guest in their home, they are going to just treat you like you are a god. They are going to serve you with amazing food, and you're going to be very well taken care of.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sri Lanka is located just at the very southern tip of India. And although a lot of people would look at like, I guess, Sri Lankans and Indians and have a difficult time telling like them apart, like from a visual standpoint, we actually found that Sri Lanka was quite different from what we had experienced in like northern and central India. So we took a flight down to Colombo and we hopped on probably the scariest bus ride we had ever experienced, and we never ever would do that again, because we hopped in on like a 9 or a 10 o'clock in the night bus. This guy was like trying to pretend he was Need for Speed.
The bus was packed. Okay, we're in there like sardines in a can. Like, I don't know how many people were in the back row, but probably like 7 or 8. We're jammed in there with our luggage on our lap. We were holding it.
Just our bags, yeah.
Yeah, our bags. I was terrified. I think our destination to go to was Haparana, but we did not make it there.
We maybe made like halfway. It was like past midnight at this point, maybe even 1 o'clock. We literally were so scared. So we decided to get off at like the next stop because we were like seriously scared for our lives. We hopped off in the middle of nowhere, legit, and saw this building over there, and we were just hoping it was a hotel, and it was hoping that it was rooms.
What would have happened if it would have been? Like, I don't even know. We would have been stranded in this.
I think we would have just like chilled like on the side of the road until like a taxi came by or something.
At this point, I feel like India, we'd had enough experiences of just finding a hotel. Like as we landed in our place, you start to get a sense that we were just kind of like rolling with the punches because in the end, like everything ended up working out. So that's where we were, is like, it will work out. Let's get off.
Yeah. So we got off and we walked over to the half-finished building and talked to some guys at the reception desk and said, hey, we need a room for the night. And they showed us this like dingy, half-finished bedroom with spider webs and maybe like a single bulb hanging from the light, like in the hallway. It was quite the developing building.
It was literally in construction. So we had cement walls, but we were like, deal.
They like tried to charge us. We were being very stickler at the time too. And they told us it was going to be roughly like $8 or $9 for the night. And we were like, for this? Like,
yeah.
Anyway, I think we ended up sleeping a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And the next morning we hopped into a little tuk-tuk to go the rest of the way because we didn't want to do a bus. And we finally made it to the place we were hoping to get to in daylight. Solid, calm driving, and our emotional senses were better.
I love that our like calm driving is literally like open walls, doors of a tuk-tuk. Still probably dangerous, but that's just what we did. Actually, for the rest of Sri Lanka, I think we rented like little motorbikes.
Yeah, we took a train a couple times, but we did do like little mopeds and stuff to get around. The first place that we went to was Sigiriya Rock, which is an incredible, beautiful formation. And then second place we did was like a elephant safari. And Rissa did some research to try and find one that was
ethical, that had like a conservation mindset. I don't know what it's like now, but I do think, at least back in the time, it was like you need to be cautious of which one you're going to for the treatment of the animals, for one that's more of like a natural preserve area
versus ones that like bring them in on a chain and let people ride them and etc. So we were in a Jeep and we got incredibly close. Like I'm looking back at these pictures, we got incredibly close to some amazing just like backgrounds with the elephants and like the family, like the herd of elephants there. And it was that was by far like, I think the most memorable time in Sri Lanka for me, at least looking back and just seeing these massive creatures and being like, this is really cool.
Yeah. So it would be a lot of times where we'd be driving around and there was, not seeing any animals. So it wasn't like any small area. So then after that, we hopped on like the famous train in Sri Lanka.
Yeah. So the place you're talking about is Nuwara Eliya. And this is where it's like the blue colored train going through like the tea fields. And it's incredible. We loved having cooler temperatures. We were sweating so much in India. Yeah. It was a beautiful place. We got to go and like tour, like see a little bit more of the process of how the tea leaves are harvested and how they make teas for all over. I think it was a Lipton tea factory plantation that we had visited. But this is also the place where we really connected with the food of Sri Lanka. And that was where we had our first kotu.
It was so spicy, I remember, but after that, we would order it a lot. Thankfully, the other dishes weren't quite as spicy, but were delicious. We loved it. And I also was going to just hop back quickly about the train ride. It's so funny because online you're going to see beautiful pictures, like Tanner mentioned, of the blue trains. But our experience on the train was like jam-packed in again, very, very crowded. And there were people selling peanuts on the train.
Yeah.
We got in a conversation with some other foreigner tourists. I think they were Irish. But oftentimes it was so tightly jam-packed in that like some people could sit down, but a lot of people were just standing up the entire train ride. And it was like 4 hours or something.
It was not short.
So I think it just helps to paint a picture. Like we're not talking luxurious. We're talking like public, local transportation, because it is hard to see pictures and think a travel looks one type of a way. And in reality, it's so different from that.
That was very true for that experience.
And also with the tea plantations, it was very interesting to go and learn about it. And in the same breath, we saw these communities living at the tea plantations, the workers. I don't know the logistics about it and how much, they were being paid and what their room and board looked like. Well, I guess I could say we saw some of it and it didn't look that great. Yeah. And so I think we're also throughout these experiences having conflict of, the ethicality of certain things. Just like starting to really understand how different everyone's lives are around the world.
And through a lot of our travels, whether it was like visiting plantations or seeing living conditions or manufacturing, like you definitely see the disparities between other countries. And we definitely recognized our privilege being raised and born in a certain place, because it completely changes for everybody else.
And honestly, I think that's why people should travel, is to be able to have a new perspective and to have their eyes open to how different lives look across the world.
Yeah, especially the way that we traveled, it opened our eyes up because we weren't going on like large tours with a bunch of other tourists. We were doing our own thing, trying to go visit less popular places while also still going to like popular destinations. We wanted to get off more of the beaten path and see things. And doing the way that we did, we got to see more of those local interactions compared to the big tourist traps as much.
So Ella, I can't think of Ella without thinking about the time where I thought I was going to die in Sri Lanka, literally rock climbing to find these wading pools at the top of the mountain, but literally hiking on animal tracks and being lost.
We had the great idea of going to this beautiful waterfall. I can't even remember the name of it, but we had this excursion. We got dropped off by a tuk-tuk driver at the base of the waterfall. There was a hike that you could do, and you could get up to some wading pools, and it had a beautiful view. It was like 20 to 50 feet away from like the edge of the waterfall, but like a beautiful view of the area. And we thought we were on the right trail.
We should have known. It wasn't that long on that trail that we were like, this is probably not it.
Yeah.
But we persevered.
We literally were climbing like with vines. We were literally pulling like jungle vines and following, who knows, maybe a jaguar trail up the side of a mountain. And we legit thought, we're like, it was so steep that it would be more dangerous going back down than to keep going up. And we thought, we're going to spook upon like the cave or a den of like a predator animal, and we're going to be attacked, or like a snake or something like that.
The relief that came when we saw those pools, like, I think that was one of my scariest moments of the whole trip. Like, and we're not trying to exaggerate it, but it was just one of those moments where we're like, that was dumb. We're smarter than that. Why did we not turn around much earlier?
Yeah, we thought we were okay enough to just keep pushing through, but
like we said, sometimes travel just like works itself out, and we thankfully were able to do it. We stayed at a guest house. For 2 nights, we paid $32. So that kind of offers perspective because this was in a more touristy area. And then we went down to the coastal area, and we went to Marissa Beach, actually. And that was fun to go and explore that. We rented little boogie boards for a couple hours. We went to a coconut farm. We actually went to a turtle hatchery. We saw 3-day-old turtles that had been endangered. Most of them had come to the hatchery because they accidentally got caught in the fisherman nets. So it was sad to see some of the fins cut off, but it was awesome to see that, there was a place where they could go to try and be cared for to live a longer life. And they were so, so cute. And then after that, we went and watched the sunset from the beach, a beautiful area. But that was kind of an interesting experience.
Yeah, that was one of those moments where you really started to see social media having an impact on like where people travel and like for what purpose. Because it definitely seemed that, like us, people wanted to go there for a picture, but even to the point where people are waiting like really long times to go and get these pictures rather than maybe enjoying a walk on the beach or maybe enjoying a sunset dinner or something. And I get that there's every type of traveler, but for us, as we document like all of our videos now, or we have in the past, like we get that there's the memories that people want to get. But it's also interesting to think about and see how social media has influenced people to go to a place just for the social perspective.
I think it is okay to want to get pictures to document our travels. I mean, it would be incredibly hypocritical of us to be, critiquing that too much because we know that is what we do. And I also think the reason for travel needs to be much greater than that. So I think it's just important to ask ourselves, why do we want to go there? Is it to say that we have and to post about it? Or is it because we genuinely want to be able to experience this place, to learn about it, to see more of the world?
And to give back to the local community there too, like as best as you can, rather than supporting per se these large companies or large hotel chains, that are making money, but the local community is not quite so much.
And I'm sure that there's many decisions that we've made that we could have chosen a more conscious decision about or been more mindful, but it is all just about learning and growing as we come. And so I think it's worth mentioning. And in that moment, that is what we saw back in 2018. We haven't been back to Sri Lanka since then, but I have friends that have went, and I do think that we went to like Marissa Beach area before a lot of tourism hit, because the experiences that she was telling me about were actually quite different than when we went.
So wrapping up with Sri Lanka, one travel tip I was thinking about is to honestly get on two wheels. Renting a motorbike or a moped of sorts, if you're comfortable with it, is by far like an experience that allows so much flexibility. One, it's affordable. Two, it's freeing and fun. I think that would be my travel tip.
And mine would be to eat the food, because it is different than any of the other food we had. It's its own type of cuisine. The food that we had was delicious. So next, one of our favorite countries is Myanmar. And I would say that this country exceeded our expectations. Obviously, we didn't fully know what to expect, but we fell in love with the country.
Myanmar was one of those countries I had no clue what was like in the country. I honestly knew that it was referenced as Burma. Growing up, that was the only reference I had heard. Unfortunately, the ongoing like genocide and fighting between the different religious and cultural groups was kind of like at the headlines. Even at the time, on like the far side of the country, there were ongoing like battles between like the local communities and stuff. So it was a little nerve-wracking that we were going to be entering this country that had been war-plagued and, in my opinion, had a little bit of a bad image for me. But like you said, it greatly surpassed our expectations because, well, for one, the people were incredibly kind, really welcoming, and secondly, we had some really great culture experiences.
I actually didn't know if we'd be able to make it far enough to be here in Myanmar, because as a reminder, we had only planned for about 2 months. So it was when we were in Sri Lanka that Tanner and I had a conversation on how he was doing, if we wanted to keep traveling. I was loving it. And after that conversation, Tanner had the travel bug and, he wanted to keep going.
That's true. I was on board at that point and ready to keep going.
So then we kind of along the way would book the next country and our plans. Then we decided to go here to Myanmar. And like Tanner had mentioned, because of the ongoing conflict, we had to be aware of what areas were safe to travel to. The cities we chose to go to was Yangon, which was the capital, and then Bagan, and then we went to Mandalay and Inle Lake. All of them were amazing. Bagan definitely was a highlight. It's an area that just kind of takes you back in time. So envision like these huge fields with dirt bottoms, bushes, and some trees spread out, but then all of these pagodas. So pagodas, how I perceive them, is kind of like temples. They're places of worship, and there are thousands of them. So we stayed in accommodation, had our e-bike, and we just would wake up really early in the morning, drive around them, watch the sunset with these pagodas. And it was just one of those magical moments.
And when you say e-bike, you mean like literally like an e-motorbike, because it wasn't pedaled by any means.
Right.
But that was an incredible experience where for hours we were able to just go and explore these red brick pagodas, these temples, and get to go just drive around them. And they have like a cone-shaped top and like a narrow steeple. Yeah, we got to watch sunsets in and around them. We got to drive around and just really take in the architecture behind all of it.
Oh, one thing that they had on was like the white
Clay?
They would rub wood pulp on their faces. Do you remember that? Even the locals.
It was like a natural sunscreen that they would use. And yeah, it was like a pale off-white
and kind of like a
paste.
fashion trend.
Yeah.
Is the local lady there at the village had showed us how they use like a flat, smooth stone to run the wood with water against the stone, and that was what got the pulp from it. Mm-hmm. From there, we went to Mandalay, which is the second largest city in Myanmar, and we had a lot of fun. We spent a couple days here exploring more temples. We went on the water and exploring the markets.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience. I do remember the markets and being like, this is fun. Like, let's do more markets. Mm-hmm. And we did, as we went through the different countries, we did. But this is like not a tourist area that we were in. It felt like a very day-to-day, everyone kind of like doing their own thing, and just being able to see people in their element was really fun.
Mm-hmm. We started to get asked for pictures here because I don't think people were used to seeing foreigners as often. I mean, we did get that a lot in India. We didn't mention that, but also be aware of that in India. If you're going to stand out as a foreigner, you'll probably have individuals coming up to you. At least back in 2018, we did. But after that, we went on an overnight bus ride. Do you remember the voice of the bus driver? Do you remember how to do that?
That was here. Yeah, it was. Thank you so much. Have a good day. The way that they talk in their native tongue is very much like they drag on like the last consonants or like the last sound of a word. And so it was just like, here we are with our little like snacks, and we're getting on the bus and, you know, explaining stuff and like, yeah, thank you so much. Having a good day. Just like very nasally, whiny, like,
I love those memories.
Yeah.
Like, and it's fun to look back on.
Absolutely. Inle Lake was by far, I think, one of our highlights of Myanmar, if I were to say that. After Bagan and driving around the pagodas, Inle Lake was fun because we had an incredible cooking class. I think that was one moment where Rissa and I were like really settling in to appreciate local cuisine. And we booked a several-hour cooking class with this lady. It started even before the cooking. We met up with her and went to the market. We got the fish that we had. I don't remember the name of the fish, and we got spices, we got some vegetables, and we headed back to her house to cook this like 8+ course meal. And it was incredible.
It was traditional Shan food. So we did like the Shan noodle salad. We had bought fish, lobster, veggies, pineapple, dragon fruit. You were right. It really was an 8-course meal.
Yeah, I remember. It was so many different dishes, and the flavors were so delicious. And I think in part that comes from like when you get to prepare food, I think there's this added level of appreciation for the food that you eat when you're preparing it. That was such an incredible experience. I was really happy that we had that memory. For the longest time, it was like you and me, and that was my Facebook profile picture was of us there.
It is an amazing experience to be able to walk in the market and see all of the different types of foods that they have. And then on top of that, it becomes another like cultural experience to be able to make it with a local that's teaching you how to learn about the foods that individuals eat around the world. Like, it is just one of our favorite things because food can teach you and tell you so much about a group of people. It just gives you a lot more insight to their lives as food brings people together. It's a huge social thing, and the food was amazing.
Inle Lake, that was one of, again, a little bit more of a touristy photo op. On Lake Inle, there are traditional fishing methods where the fishermen or women would go out on these boats, and they have these very large woven baskets that they will like balance with their pointed straw woven hats, and they would like balance on one foot with the oar and one foot with on the boat, and then their hand with the basket, if I'm not mistaken, right? That was incredible to go out there and just see how they have like their little waterways and like the fishing techniques, although they differ now a little bit, and that's more of the traditional method. That was really fun, except for it being extremely loud because the motor they had on the back of that boat was so loud.
We'll be sure to include some of these pictures in this video. So if you're listening on podcasts and you want to see some of these pictures, be sure you switch over to the video so you can kind of get a visual of some of these things we're talking about. Spread throughout the video, we'll try and include at least a couple pictures from each country. There was one really like soul crushing, honestly, experience we had in Myanmar. And that was when we were at the bus station waiting to hop on an overnight bus ride. And we had these little girls that came to us and were asking for food and water. I guess this in part could be a travel tip for you as well, but it's mostly just to share that, you see the dark parts when you travel, especially like this.
We were at the bus stop, and these two little girls asked for some food, and we shared what food and snacks, and I think we went and bought some peanuts.
We bought like Gatorades and like electrolyte drinks.
Yeah, to share with them, and they ate it and drank it so fast. You could just tell that they'd been through a lot, whether individually or together. I think it was time for us to go, and then they just ran off into the dark, into the fields, and it just makes you really think about how many families and kids especially are affected by poverty and hunger, and whether they were orphans or not, but just like they were doing what they could to not have a hungry belly.
Maybe you had forgotten this, but at one point they went into the field and then they came back out with like a paper asking for money. There was someone that was, kind of directing them, and we don't know their story. But, there is a dark side to child trafficking. That was my assumption of what was going on. Yeah, it's heavy. Do you have a travel tip for Myanmar?
I would say the travel tip would be to book a local experience getting your hands on the food. And we'll say that about almost every country, right? Food is like by far, I'm sorry, but if you're traveling across the world and your most exciting, memorable meal is a fast food chain, like it's maybe time to branch out a little bit and to try and expand your palate.
Love it. And if you can, try and stay with local accommodation, because places that depend on tourism, they need it. We just want the money to be able to go towards the locals.
So now our next country was Indonesia, which was the second longest country that we spent time in after India. This is also the country where we spent our first time with like a woofing family. And woofing, like we mentioned at the beginning, is the organization where hosts can post their house or their farm or whatever location they have with an experience, and volunteers can, whoever like signed up with the program, can request a time to come out, usually for like a minimum of a week or something like that. And that's what we did. We found ourselves in the city of Klaten, Indonesia, which is on the main island. We had an amazing experience.
Yeah, so here we stayed with a local family. They had one daughter at the time, and we just fell in love with their family. We still stay in contact with them, and I mean, it's just been fun to see like their daughter grow up, and now they have another one. In general, I think it's so cool that this family opens up their home to foreigners. Their business is an English school, and I think it's really helped them because they've been able to have native English speakers come and teach, and they're not having to pay, but people are getting free stay. I just see it as a win-win opportunity, and we loved it. Like, we were able to work with a lot of kids. And in fact, there was one time we went to some sort of celebration. They literally placed Tanner and I in front of the microphone to sing songs in front of these like kids and adults. There was like an audience.
It was legit like an elementary school. They had us sit down and they're like, we'll do like a karaoke sing-along kind of thing. And they're like, do you guys know John Legend? Honestly, I had heard a few songs, but I like really wasn't that big. And they had us do karaoke sing-along of All of Me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And like hearing how bad and off-key we were, it was kind of funny. But it was a fun memory. Everyone is so friendly, happy to have us there, and the teaching experience was really fun. Staying with them in their home and being able to go out to dinner with them and a whole bunch of stuff, like it was a very awesome experience, and we do love staying in contact with the family as well.
Most of the individuals we were working with were Muslim, and this was really awesome for us to experience and come in contact with like teenagers that would wake up at 5 a.m. for their first prayer of the day. We saw a lot of devotion. We also saw a lot of similarities from our religion. I remember them being shocked that we ourselves didn't drink alcohol, because a lot of the other foreigners that would come would talk about that, and they would, always ask the foreigners like these questions and get to know them. And so we did have some religious discussions, and there was a lot of similarities between like the Mormon theology and Muslim. The family that we stayed with, they actually didn't really cook a lot of food at home. Like, they went out to eat almost every meal because they said it was cheaper for them to do that. There's a lot of street markets and just affordable food.
Yeah, definitely affordable. I think even for one time we went and sat down and we had like baby birds and nasi goreng and mee goreng, which is fried rice and fried noodles. I think it came out to be like $1.50 for all of us to eat, or maybe per person. Either way, it was extremely cheap. Overall, the experience was so eye-opening again, because it was a very humble home. I believe it was an old school that we were staying in. Bucket showers again, right? The room that they let us stay in was a simple mattress on the floor with a large mosquito net covering it. And the time of the year that we were there, it was so humid and hot that like we were both having a hard time sleeping at night. Although the experience was well worth it, it was definitely harder. Like, this is how people live, and they're used to sleeping all the time. But for us, obviously coming from not a humid place in the States and having air conditioning, beds, carpet, whatever, like it was quite the contrast. Definitely makes you appreciate the like little things, and then again see how so many people live a completely different way.
We were like trying to tilt the fan that we had to like be a little like tilted down on us without falling on us. You had to be a little creative. It was so good for us just to have those experiences.
Indonesia, being a volcanic island, like created from it, has a lot of volcanoes, so it was fun to see those. By far, my favorite memory of adventure in Indonesia was doing the Mount Bromo hike. So anyway, we leave from Malong at like 10 p.m. and we get a tour. We get like a driven up to this viewpoint where we have to hike a little bit further. And although it's super hot during the day, it's really cold because you're up in the mountains at this point. So I remember we bought 2 beanies from like a local shop there. I don't think we bought gloves. Anyway, we made it work, and we went up there and we waited. It was like 4 a.m. and we waited for sunrise. And as the sun came up, luckily the clouds were clear enough, and there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 very prominent stratovolcanoes in this valley, and it was incredible. And like even one of them was still, a lot of them are still active, but one of them was like spewing out like smoke. So it was just an incredible, incredible view, like a very touching, earthing moment to be up there. And then later we got to go down and hike up to the crater of one of them, which is really cool, very steep. And I got to drive like one of the little Jeeps around, and a very special and very memorable time.
It actually wasn't our only volcano experience. We actually hiked up to Lake Ijen, and that was a taxing, strenuous hike up there. But up at the top, they had a lot of sulfur, so we had to wear these masks on top. And anyways, just again, we saw sunrise at a volcano, and we had a lot of these adventurous experiences at the southern part of like that main island. And then after that, we headed over to Bali. And with Bali, we knew that tourism was already quite a big deal. A lot of foreigners, especially from like Australia, decide to stay in Bali for like longer term and work from there. So we decided to take a path that was a little bit more off that touristy path, and we explored more of the northern area. We rented a motorbike again and explored various different locations. We would like go on hikes down to like waterfalls. I feel like that area was like chasing waterfalls, just like getting lost on our motorbike exploring.
Yeah, it was an incredible time again to have the mobility we did, and to be away from the hustle and bustle of Denpasar and like other areas, because it was and still is like a tourist, very popular tourist place. Our time in Bali and several other islands around there were very picturesque. Like it's paradise, honestly. There's so many amazing beaches, rice paddies, waterfalls to go and experience, and there's a reason why it's become very popular.
Yeah, so if we were to give an advice to those traveling to Indonesia, I think it would be to get off the beaten path, the tourist path, and explore other areas. We haven't been to Bali since 2018, so I am sure it's changed a lot even since we did. So maybe some of those off the beaten path areas aren't,
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard because they're even building an elevator at Kelingking Beach.
Oh, wow.
Which is like the one that looks like the T-Rex head, the beach that's incredible. It's a beautiful view. But yeah, they're building an elevator all the way down to the beach. It's like several hundred meters tall. So it's unfortunate that like some of those places are going to just increase the number of people that can visit. Again, it's not somewhere like we're discouraging people to go to, but like you said, there are so many other places that you can have local experiences and still get to see some of those tourist places, but also try to support other areas.
Yeah, and it's just they're quieter, they're lesser known, but I mean in Indonesia, I feel like everywhere you look is quite beautiful. So Malaysia seems to be the hub where we always like flew into. Like you kind of land there to go to another one. I think that's what happened from Myanmar to Indonesia. But after Indonesia, we decided to stay in Malaysia for a couple days and be able to experience it for ourselves. Malaysia, in my opinion, is more of like a melting pot. You get a lot of influence from the surrounding countries, which in turn makes it its own kind of culture.
Yeah, we were there for just a few days. We were in Kuala Lumpur. To be honest, it wasn't like our favorite because it was like such a big city. But with it, it still had a lot of fun memories. We went to like an aviary one of the days, which is, I love birds, and like it was really fun. We would go and see like the 2 twin towers in like the main area. We would try lots of delicious food from multicultural restaurants and food street stands.
They had big markets with amazing food on them. And I think there was like an area that had more like Indian style food, and then one that was more like your traditional Malaysian foods. I think you can find a lot of diverse foods, whatever you're looking for. But also I feel like the night markets were like a really big deal there. But I will always remember our accommodations there because Tanner planned most of this trip. It was just different than I expected. Looking back, it's really cool. He chose like a high-rise apartment building, and we slept on the floor in the living room.
On a little mattress on the floor in their living room of this couple that they were from India originally, but they had moved to Malaysia for work. And yeah, I can't remember what floor we were on, but it was really high. And it was fun. Like you got to have like a little bit of a view of the city, and the experience to, I guess, brush shoulders with them for just a short time was kind of fun.
You chose it because you wanted the rooftop infinity pool view, right? Isn't that why?
Yeah, that was in part because it was cheaper. It was fairly close to like kind of a central area. We had been traveling for several months on quite budget places for a while, so I was like, this will be like a budget upgrade, I guess. I still think it was
sleeping on the floor. I love it.
I still think it was like $20 a night or something like that. It was a fun experience.
But the view from the top, you guys, worth the ground mattress.
Probably because it was such a short time, like we don't have a whole lot to share, I guess, with Malaysia. One thing that is like our funniest memory about there is we're headed to Vietnam next. So we check out of our place and we go to the airport. And we check into the counter and they're like, your flight is for tomorrow.
Smackhead.
So we had been off by a day on our itinerary and we were like, okay, the flight leaves in like 2 hours or an hour or whatever. I was like, are there seats available? And they're like, oh yeah, there are. And I was like, can you just move us? They're like, oh, that'll be like $500 more. And we were like, you literally are going to have unused seats. Like you're closing the gate in like 30 minutes. Come on. And they're like, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. That's just capitalism at its finest, but
it's how it works. We understand. I would have been surprised if they would have made the exception.
So anyway, we checked ourselves into the hotel on site because it was kind of a drive, I guess, to get out to the airport. And we're like, we're not going to waste time going back and forth. So we paid $70 for a hotel that night. And I actually remember we were both really tired, so we ended up catching up on some sleep. It was good to have a rest day. We went to the restaurants in the airport. And
all
then
elevated prices.
Think we caught up on like a show or two or something and slept in.
Yeah, that's what we did, was basically just walk the airport and sleep and eat some food. One of those like travel mishaps that everyone has them as well. And you just have to, I guess, laugh it off and make the most out of it. And we did.
Roll with it.
So Malaysia, maybe go outside of the capital. We didn't do it, but take it from us and have the tip to explore more beyond the capital.
Yeah.
Let us know how that goes. Mm-hmm. Vietnam. I really liked Vietnam. I especially loved our time in northern Vietnam. We decided to go on this motorbike adventure. Tanner and I shared one, as we always did. We did a loop around the Ha Giang region. This was stunning scenery. We're talking like amazing hills, rice paddies, kind of like drastic.
Yeah, they were mountains. Not hills, they were mountains.
Drastic mountains. We put all of our stuff into one bag and we left it at like the hostel, and we did like a 3 night, 4 day trip. We were driving past like old villages up nestled in the Vietnamese mountains close to the Chinese border.
Mm-hmm. It was an incredible place. Like, I think you're downplaying it maybe a little bit there. We left that experience thinking Vietnam is the coolest, but it was because we were able to stop by, like you said, in these villages, and a couple of them, had places kind of set up with the hostel hotel that we stayed at. They had designated points where you could stay. You didn't have to choose them, but a lot of people would. And I remember several times, because it was quite rainy, everyone would be like kind of sopping wet, coming in, parking their bikes, hanging their stuff to dry, and like being in this big communal area. We sat down and had a cooked meal with all of the people. Yeah, just, you got to have like more of that communal feel, having homemade Vietnamese cuisine. There is such a wide variety of food within Asia.
In fact, at one of the dinners, the homestay owner offered us like rice wine. But at the time we weren't drinking alcohol. Everyone was like, come on. And we're like cheersing and drinking and just having a fun time. And that was one of those moments where I remember also being like, dang, like I wish so badly that I could just participate in this like cultural experience. We did have that, honestly, in other destinations along the way where, we just weren't participating because of religious beliefs, which is okay. But also the reason I wasn't was just because I was told not to, because I actually felt like it was wrong to participate.
Well, you did think that it was wrong to participate because of what we were taught and told to not.
Yeah, but I also feel like if it was me making the decisions, seeing that it nothing seemed wrong about it in that moment. It was just that I knew I shouldn't.
Sure, especially for how little,
they
were doing. But anyway, so if anyone is thinking about doing an activity or going to Vietnam, that's one that I over and over tell people, look into going into northern Vietnam. These mountains and peaks and valleys that we drove through were so stunning. And Unfortunately, you got to see some of the effects of, the American-Vietnam War through a lot of the areas, like people fishing out of like these large fishing holes that were created from the bombs that were dropped, or hearing about like the communities that had Agent Orange and stuff sprayed in them. Like, there's definitely a dark side to it as well. For us, it definitely made us learn more about Vietnamese culture outside of the history that we were taught in school, which unfortunately Americans learn history through wars. Like, people know geography in America because of wars, not so much because of other reasons. And for us, it was really refreshing to get to have more cultural experience outside of, what the American involvement was.
Yeah, well said. We actually went to like a war museum in Ho Chi Minh that gave us more information, and that was very interesting. Leaving Ha Giang, we went to Ha Long Bay, which is a very popular destination where individuals will sometimes take like an overnight boat tour in this region, and there's just dramatic mountains, cliffs.
Out of the ocean.
Right, out of the ocean. And then we went down to Ninh Bình, which we loved. Again, dramatic scenery. You can take these beautiful boats through caves and on top of the water. They're entirely different landscapes, but both touching water and beautiful mountains. We are kind of speeding through some of that, but just really fun areas to look into if you go to Vietnam. Definitely try the food everywhere you go. Try the food. We developed a love for tofu in a lot of the Asian countries we went to, which was really fun. I feel like that started in Myanmar, and I feel like in all of these countries since we tried a lot of tofu. Do you have any travel tips?
My travel trip for Vietnam would be to really organize like a nature-related trip, because there is so much jungle in Vietnam and so many like opportunities to explore.
Also, Vietnam, if we're being completely honest, was the country I had to pee in a bag in an overnight bus ride because there was no stops available and I had to go pee so bad. So sometimes travel looks pretty and sometimes it is not.
I will say that was crazy. Anyway, our next country that we went to was Cambodia, and Cambodia is most famously known for Angkor Wat, which we definitely didn't want to miss. That was one of our highlights of the trip too. Although very touristy, and I know it continues to be more and more touristic, it's fun to read about and to experience like kind of the mystery about Angkor Wat, the community there, because there was so much unknown about why it was left abandoned. One of my favorite memories of Cambodia was around Angkor Wat area. There were, street vendors for food or for tourist items. And a couple of the ladies would consistently, as we were talking to them, looking for, baby clothes. Actually, at the time, we were looking for stuff for like future kids. They were like, I need lucky money. I need lucky money. Like this is where the lucky money joke kind of comes around sometimes for us. But like a cute way to reference like, hey, I'd appreciate your support.
Yeah, that is true. I forgot about that. In some of the countries we went to, we would get a hold of some of the baby versions of their traditional clothes because we just thought that would be a fun way to like, I guess, share our experiences with our kids, not knowing if they were boy or girl. So we actually ended up with some boy clothes too, like one of each. Turns out we had 2 girls, so those ones never got used. I do remember getting foot massages after Angkor Wat because that's what they offered and was available close to our accommodation. And it was like, what, $3?
It was $2 for a one hour massage for each of us. Like we each paid $2, I think.
Yeah. So affordable.
We went to Phnom Penh and we were there for a couple nights. I remember that. Ironically, we went to church. We found a Mormon church and we went to one of the very few times that we did on that trip, just because for one, it was hard to find them, and 2, our trip was for experiencing, and like obviously we were prioritizing experiences rather than trying to find a church to go to. But in Phnom Penh, we did go to I think we went to a market or 2 there as well. One thing I do regret is not trying like scorpions, crickets, and like other bugs that they had basically like fried or cooked. I think at that point we were just trying to stick with other foods at the time, but
I mean, I do think we tried those snails, remember? Out of the
those
shell.
were amazing too.
Even in the markets, you would see like those eggs with like the beaks and like the little, were they little chicks?
Yeah, they were, I think they were chickens.
That
Ducks?
people would
No.
eat like kind of like half cooked. I don't know. That one
We didn't
does
do
make
that one,
me
though.
sad. But yeah, there was a lot of insects. that they would have. And then we did do the
We had the
snails with
snails.
like a spicy sauce.
Yeah, it was like a spicy chili sauce that we had them with. It was really good. I think at this point, also, it's easy to admit we were pretty exhausted because we had been going. We still have like relaxing travel days, but adventure days, right? We were going out hard for full days trying to see as much as we could. And so sometimes we'd have a couple half of a days or whatever where we just kind of just crash and try to relax and recover a little bit.
Yeah, so if I think about doing this with kids, I mean, it would look so different. We would have to be doing half the amount of things at the same amount of time, if not more, just because with kids, it takes longer to do all of that. Like even the hike to one waterfall could be a full day
Basically
thing.
would do, yeah, a full day thing.
Whereas we're cramming a lot into it. So we did have a lot of those rest periods. Malaysia and Cambodia, we didn't spend as much time in them. And I mean, it would be great to do more if we could, but what a privilege it was to be even able to dedicate 5 to 6 months on a backpacking trip. Most people don't have more than 2 weeks if you're in the States because of time off.
Yeah.
Ideally, if time wasn't a thing, we would have stayed longer, but we really wanted to make our way over to Thailand because that was a country that I had explored before and was very excited to show Tanner. We love Thai food. We knew we did, so we knew we'd love the food scene, and I mean, expectations were met.
We did, yeah. First, we're in Bangkok, I think, for 4 or 5 nights in a little hostel with not even full floor-to-ceiling walls, but it was okay enough. Like, it was fine. It was It was clean. It was really in a popular area close to the metro. We also took time to explore lots of the temple grounds and shopping districts within Bangkok. Bangkok is a huge city.
We just loved it. The food markets are amazing. The street food scene in Thailand is a must. But then we headed south. We wanted to explore some of the islands down there. So we did go to Phi Phi Island, which I would say is overrun. It's too touristic. I enjoyed it the first time and thought, oh, well, we'll go back again with Tanner. But I think after having 4 months at this time in Asia, we really got a sense of where we like to spend our time. Unfortunately, we just didn't make the best decision on that one because it was very touristy.
It was still a good experience, but it was definitely touristy. So we were excited to leave the very touristy Phi Phi Island and go to Khao Sok National Park. We went on a hike. It was rainy, drizzly weather, so it wasn't like great, but it wasn't hot. Funny enough, we were attacked by tiny leeches on our feet during the walk because we were just hiking in our sandals, which we, were our like everyday go-to shoes. But yeah, that was a beautiful place to experience like a rainforest environment. We didn't even really go on that far of a hike, honestly, because it was so wet.
Well, and I was too scared. I remember we didn't have a tour guide. We're trying to do things economically, okay? So you could pay a lot more money to go more into the national park and do like a boat ride. Some people even stay inside the national park, like on these beautiful little like cabins on the water where they can just like jump into the water from there. And like, I think you go to breakfast by like a boat. Like there's some amazing experiences. We're budget over here, okay? So we're staying maybe still in the park, but on a different area away from the lake. Yeah, we are like, you know what? We can just explore on our own. Because it was rainy, we were like the only ones out there. And these are thick jungles. And I'm worried we're going to see a python because in Indonesia and Thailand, like I still, even to this day, will see like those crazy news article that's like, python snake comes up toilet in Bangkok City. Literally in like such a densely populated area, there's like stories like this. Or like python snake attacks and eats cute Indonesian woman in her garden, like that was one of my fears going into Asia, was just not wanting to see a huge snake. And we didn't. And of course, like it's a bit traumatic as well. But being in this national park that's like preserved to keep nature as nature, I'm a little worried.
Yeah. So we didn't really do anything on that point.
Tanner's like, I don't have anything to say.
We didn't really have anything besides the leeches. And I do, again, remember at that point, I think we took like a relaxing afternoon because it was raining quite a bit too. And I think we weren't really up for it. But it was beautiful, like getting up into the park, and even the area that we did see in the park was still beautiful.
We had bought face masks and we just had a fun night, like wearing face masks and just like being silly and funny. And I do feel like in part, our relationship, how it is today, is because of moments like that. We're literally in a national park in Thailand, not knowing anyone, surrounded by big bugs. We're just like learning, experiencing so much of the world, and in between having funny moments, watching movies and wearing face masks and talking about our hopes and dreams for what's going to happen after, but really just being present as well.
Yeah, I definitely remember it.
Yeah. I remember like walking the streets and actually in Vietnam and being like, you'd think at this point we're spending 24/7 with each other that we could be sick of each other, but not once. Not once.
No, I mean, there were times where we probably got on each other's nerves and like needed some time, but we never like went a full day upset with each other or like on each other's nerves. If one of us wanted to relax or whatever, we could, and we didn't have to like put in their energy and attention to taking care of kids or to worrying about a lot. And it was nice that we were very flexible on like our itinerary.
Yeah, I mean, that is one tip that just in general, if you have the means to step away from your job for a little bit and save up to go on a trip like this, I think it is so good for like a world perspective. And it's also great for like a self-development and relationship development
I agree.
experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, Thailand, any tips?
I would say Thailand's tip would be to try and avoid the animal experiences. You do see these animals in captivity and being used for entertainment purposes. Experience the wildlife and stuff as much in its natural habitat away from the zoos and the other places like that, you know.
And since you mentioned that, in case if anyone goes to look at our socials, like when I went in as a freshman in college, like I did go to a zoo and they had a tiger there, literally like chained up, like 2 tigers at just a zoo opening. And we did take a picture with them. Me not even realizing what it would take for these tigers to not.
To be sedated and drugged up, yeah.
Yeah, and I did ride an elephant in Thailand. And so there was a lot that within those years, like I realized, oh, that's not right. But they're still available as far as I know.
Sure. And I'm not saying like, you know, we haven't done anything that hasn't been ethical or whatever, but just like the more and more that I'm trying to visualize stuff, like ethical travel has to be conscious, like decisions. And just because it's available doesn't mean that it should be done.
The time has come. Our Asia travels we're wrapping them up. Thailand was our last country, and somewhere along the lines, I think we're in Indonesia, we decided to kind of switch things up and extend our trip and go to Australia, as I had family living in Australia, so we knew that we could stay for free and explore some areas, and then go to New Zealand, which was like a top bucket list destination for us. We flew from Thailand, Bangkok to Australia.
Yeah, we spent a few days couch surfing in Sydney. We went to a guy who was living close to the Blue Mountains, 45 minutes or so outside of Sydney. We spent a few nights with him, kind of traveling back and forth. Honestly, it was worth enough for us to do that because it was fairly expensive in Sydney. Going to walk around like the Opera House and seeing the Sydney Bay, it was really beautiful. And Sydney was fun in and of itself. Going to like the Blue Mountains was really fun. But also just having the experience of staying with our host was kind of unique as well. Like our first couch surfing experience together.
That was the first time we had tried coffee ice cream because, you know, growing up, we couldn't have coffee. And I remember not enjoying it. So when he asked for more, I was like, no, thank you. And I think you were kind to be like, sure, I'll have some.
Yeah, I couldn't say no.
But it was just so kind. Just picture someone who opens up their home to foreigners to come and trade travel stories. And he fed us. Experiences like this restore your faith in humanity and make you realize life is so enjoyable if it's spent next to other people, having that social connection. And I think that's what he was, just like a single man seeking connection and willing to be generous.
Absolutely. Because we were on a budget, we didn't do a whole lot in Sydney. And so we don't really have any recommendations. Once we had spent a few days in Sydney and got our fill there, we actually flew up to Cairns, which is a northern part of the east coast of Australia. And we explored this area. So we went snorkeling along parts of the Great Barrier Reef. It's incredible beaches and ocean. And we really just kind of dove into the Great Barrier Reef experience up there.
And then we had some time with family, which is really fun. And that was along the Gold Coast in Australia. So we're seeing some areas that are like pristine surfing areas and just enjoying time with family in general, that we spent our Thanksgiving there actually. So that was kind of fun to be with family on an American holiday and not be so lonely, because those tend to be the times where like being away from family is the hardest.
Yeah, seeing everyone else at home, together and stuff. I got to get to know her cousins and her aunt and uncle better.
Australia in general is such a big country that there's so much that we did not see. We loved what we saw. The food was more expensive, so we really didn't eat out that much. Like, we stayed in a hostel up in Cairns to save on cost. We went to the grocery store and bought stuff. Like, again, think budget, but you make it happen just as affordably as you can. That was kind of our goal for Australia and New Zealand, as these destinations are more costly. So I think with family, we explored like maybe even a theme park, saw kangaroos. We did, we got to have some exposure to some of the like Australian animals. Which,
went swimming one time and went to the beach several times. So it was a really good time.
I'm feeling like I'm having a harder time coming up with a travel tip for Australia. Do you have any?
We couch surfed and obviously stayed with your family. And stayed in hostels. So even though we still spent more like per night on the hostels than any other place, we definitely stayed there. I don't know. I think with Australia, because it's a big country, maybe try to focus on 2 places to visit rather than hopping as much around as we did still, because it is a big country.
Yeah. So. Yeah, you could pick one place and definitely head to the water if you're close to it, because, everywhere we went, there are beautiful beaches. Even the Bondi Beach, like close to Sydney. Yeah. That was a fun. If you're in Sydney, go there. I would think there's beautiful walking trails, and it's a very popular area, but also very beautiful.
It's fun, yeah.
So our last country, and actually one of the questions we got in our Q&A on Instagram said, can I convince you to move to New Zealand?
Yeah, which would be amazing. Unfortunately, I have zero thoughts right now of wanting to move because we've been moving around so much, but we have talked about it. And New Zealand is an amazing country. Economically, I don't know a whole lot about it, but we definitely went there for the nature. When we landed in Christchurch, we picked up our car that night. It was a tiny 4-door hatchback, yellow. And
I was so happy it was yellow.
And we drove to the guy's place just a few minutes down the road from the car rental place. And we spent the night at his place. And he gave us a bunch of sleeping bags and pillows because we asked how we were doing stuff. And we said, well, we're going to be sleeping in our car.
And our plan was to go to the supermarket and just buy camping equipment. And he said, I've got some. I think because he couch surfed, he also got people who were leaving out of Christchurch. So it was perfect for us because he didn't want it. He was like their last destination drop-off stuff. And we were able to pick it up.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly. So we spent almost nothing on like additional clothing or whatever for our trip down there. We might have picked up a sweater or 2 now that I think about it from your cousin. Warmer clothes because it was still chilly in some of the areas. But that kicked off a 2-week adventure in the Southern Island that we will never forget. The fun memories of squeezing in the back of this tiny car, not fully stretched out every night sleeping, but just hiking up to the tops of peaks, swimming in some water, going to lakes, having meat pies, and getting to explore some of the area where like Lord of the Rings was filmed. Of course, there's so many memories that we have, but it's just an incredible landscape that I think we connect with so much. The South Island definitely like had us dreaming about the possibility of living there. So it's not fully off the table, maybe at some point down the road,
Never say never with us.
But at the same time, as we've talked about several times with our family, being back here in Europe and having our kids start school with the language and everything, it definitely has us wanting to set roots down per se.
A lot of our foodie experiences, we did get some meat pies, but a lot of them were spent, heating pasta in our pan that we just heated up. We did a lot of like cooking type meals, more of a rougher version of cooking. I feel like a lot of people that go to New Zealand are renting out camper vans and like appropriate vehicles meant for that. Ours was literally not meant for that.
But we made it work.
We would stay at campsites that had like those sanitary services.
Although it would be much more comfortable to have, a camping vehicle that you have more space in and stuff. But regardless, it is an incredible place to go visit the fjords, to go visit the mountains, glaciers, lakes.
A couple top highlights is exploring Milford Sound, which is the fjords area. While we were on a boat tour there, actually a pod of dolphins came up and was like chasing our boat. And then we went to bungee jumping in Queenstown.
That was such an invigorating experience too. We were there during one of their, like the 35-year anniversary of the company. And so we both did a tandem jump. You jump down and it's over the river, and we both got our heads wet, right?
It like barely
dipped into the head. It's a pretty deep river. And then we both had the chance to jump again for like 35 Australian dollars each, which is super cheap when you look at the price of initial jumping. And so we both decided to do it. And did you go all the way under? No. But I had them go all the way under. So everything but my feet went under the water. And that was crazy. Crazy. Such a fun experience. Like the most adrenaline either of us, I think, had experienced from a single activity. Takeaway from New Zealand would be explore the nature, because they have so much beautiful and untouched nature. Obviously, the comfort level would have been higher for us to have a camping van and stuff, but obviously that came with a price. But if you are going to go to New Zealand and nature is part of your reasoning, like dedicate most of your time for that. Don't be afraid of driving because it's on the opposite side of the road. That was, I believe, my first time experience driving on the opposite side. It only took like 10 or 15 minutes, and then your brain adjusts well enough. And you still have to remind yourself every day, like when you start driving again, but it was well worth it.
Yeah, you'll pick up on it fast. At that point, it was like December
18th.
Yeah. And we were flying home. When we were looking into flights home, we found one that had a layover in Tahiti. And that was a quick, yes, let's do that one. It was also the cheapest.
But it was 18 hours layover in Tahiti. Quite coincidentally, it was on our anniversary. And so we booked an Airbnb, and the hosts came and picked us up from the airport. And then we took a ferry over to one of the islands, just close by, Moorea Island. We had an amazing time just driving a little scooter around the pineapple fields, and then the beaches, and just really enjoying a very atypical layover and anniversary.
Yeah, that was such a fun time. I remember hearing French. So it was just fun to see like the French influence, the baguettes that locals were buying, and then the black sand beaches. We did a loop around the island. When you think of the French Polynesian Ocean, the beautiful pictures from it, I mean, it was that and more.
Yeah.
We could walk out for a long time in this beautiful warm water that you could just see right through. And yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. And amidst all of this, like we had been just kind of like going with the flow this whole trip, kind of coming to the end of it. It felt really good because it was right before Christmas and we were ready to go back and see family and have that experience.
Spoiler alert, we got home. And although we did love seeing family, we did love being there for Christmas, it was truly a matter of just a few weeks. And we were like itching to go back. But, you know, we had to start real life.
Yeah, we had to work. I had an interview. But overall, I would say just as like an ending message for our experience, like we never have looked back and regretted doing what we did for as long as we did. And that comes from someone who was like very skeptical at first and said like 1 month is like max. And of course, like as we got out there and I became more comfortable and more sure, it made it easier. And of course, like we had saved up. I think overall, this trip we had spent between $9,000 and $10,000 for about 6 months of travel. And seeing and doing what we did, we felt amazing about doing that. What we're trying to say is, if you have the desire and dream to travel, do what you can to prioritize it. And if money is an issue and time off is an issue, then try to be creative with it. Kind of like we did, you know.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And also, if travel's not your jam and you have big dreams to build a homestead or to do other things, whatever your passions and goals are, I guess the message for you to take away from it is to make those things happen, because in the end, like those experiences in life, you either get to have or you don't, and you get to decide your story in life. And of course, there's so many factors that we can't dictate, but if you have the means and the desire, I don't know, maybe it sounds cheesy, but it's probably worth it.
Yeah, at least it was for us.
Yeah, we loved it. And it was really fun to share this with you guys, to reminisce on it. There's a lot more stories that we could have shared, but time is up. So let us know if you have any specific questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this episode.
Be sure to follow us on our social media platforms. If you haven't already, hit that like button and the subscribe button on YouTube.
We hope you have a great day. We'll see you in the next video.
Buona giornata.